Okay, hello, hello. All right, we are live. Okay, let me make sure the comments are good to go. So first up, everybody, thanks for coming by and spending time with vBrownBag tonight. I don't know why, but my co-host left me in charge of the buttons tonight. So
especially after what happened last week with the buttons, right?
we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. But it was a fun time. So I am running the buttons tonight. You all know I am a Twitch person. So StreamYard is new to me, but we're here. And we have our guest, Danielle. Yay!
Hey,
Hi, Danielle. How are you?
pretty good. Excited to be here. Big fan of the show.
Nice. So, hello, I see you out there. Thanks for coming by. Got somebody commenting on Twitch. So, before we jump into it, Danielle, do you have any social media that you would like to call out?
Yeah, I do. I am at Heber, Deeheber. Pretty much almost anywhere. So
Nice. And we'll put that in the chat too for everyone so that way they can follow along. And then when we post this video, your information will also be posted there in the comments so that way people can find you and reach out.
awesome. Yeah, sounds great.
All right. So any background you would like to give, like a quick introduction you want to give out?
Oh man, you're going to make me talk about myself? This is hard. It's like a job interview, Yeah, I can do that. I'm Danielle Heberling. I currently live in a suburb of Portland, Oregon in the US.
Nice.
Been a software engineer professionally for about 8 years at this point, 8 months in healthcare. So pretty excited to just share what I've been working on. It's pretty different from any type of job that I've ever had before that was not healthcare.
So what are we talking about tonight?
So I'm going to get into a little bit about what I do at my day job. I got permission from my boss for what I can and cannot share. So don't want to go too detailed because that's NDA type of stuff. But I've worked in serverless for a fair amount of time. My serverless dog years are pretty high at this point. But
Nice.
a lot of times, like when people talk about serverless, they talk about, I built this Hello World app, Lambda. This is a really interesting story of how we took an existing system used by healthcare and we've built on top of it with more modern AWS serverless services. So.
Nice. I'm excited. And I'm someone who is still wrapping their head around serverless. So you can feel free to talk to me like I am Michael Scott of Cloud. That's where I'm at.
We all are, I think. Yeah, it's like it changes constantly. But that's one of the things that I like about it too, though. So.
And you said you've been working how long in this space, in the serverless space?
I've been 8 years professional software engineer, probably about 6 years at this point. Yeah.
Nice.
For serverless specific. Yeah, I had worked for a startup here in Portland, Oregon. They don't exist anymore. It was a company called Stackery, and they were actually acquired by AWS. And if you've heard of Application Composer, that's what it kind of morphed into.
Oh, wow.
So.
Okay, you're talking my language. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I just don't see myself as like a big corp type of person. So I love the Stackery folks, but yeah, I don't see myself working at AWS personally.
When you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Cool. So just quick agenda. The company that I work for is Ensimata. So I figured it was probably good that we set a baseline of what Ensimata is, kind of what we look like as a company. And we are currently in a pretty unique business situation where we have one customer. I'm going to get to that in a second. But yeah, overview of Ensimata and the customer. We're going to talk about some of the problems that we're looking to solve with the software that we're building. It's very specific to the healthcare space, brand new to me. So hopefully it's interesting to you all. And then we're just going to do some high-level architecture diagrams and talk some tech, go into solutions of how we've built this. And then I'll just wrap it up with some overall thoughts. So everyone's favorite part, the disclaimers. Things like healthcare are highly regulated. So it's going to look very different based off where you're located. So in this case, my disclaimer is this is told from a US-centric standpoint. So if you're in another country, a solution like this might not work for you, potentially. Highly regulated, which is what makes it interesting and fun. And this isn't meant to be like as a pitch for my company. I am here just as a citizen of the world, sharing what we're working on in hopes that it might be inspiring and interesting. And maybe you can use some of our ideas for your projects. The last disclaimer is I am new to healthcare tech. So been in the healthcare tech space since June of 2023. Keeps it fun, keeps it fresh. So yeah, let's talk about my company, Ensamada. If you Google us, this is what you're going to get, a very unhelpful website. It doesn't even say we're healthcare. Very confusing. So I'm going to make fun of that a little bit. But in all seriousness, we were founded 2 years ago. And we are tasked with making operations more efficient using modern technology, specifically in the healthcare space. And our main goal is to build software to help increase the quality of care to patients. And there's a nice side goal, if you do that right, can help the healthcare organizations that we call our customers, can help save them money. And it can also save the patients money too, if we are really good about recommending preventative care. Because if you think about like getting a diagnosis, you want to get that early on, because then it's cheaper and better to treat. So let's go into our one customer. Currently have one customer. To contrast, this customer is almost as old as me, the organization itself, 1988. I won't say how old I am, but I am a little bit older than that. And it's a healthcare organization. And they offer primary care, pediatric care. They also do some imaging and sleep medicine. And one thing that I will mention about this customer is they're also our parent company, which is very interesting, but also awesome, in my opinion, from an employee standpoint, because I've done like the early stage venture capital thing a few times, and this seems a lot nicer. They are very invested in wanting us to succeed. And I almost kind of view them as like an extension of my company because they partner so deeply with us.
I actually like that though, because if you think about it, the companies actually the hospitals invested in the applications, invested in the client care and more efficient care for your clients. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I've enjoyed it. Personally, I've enjoyed the pace of it too. Like, this is just my opinion, but this is one of the first jobs that I've ever had where it's like, we can really see things through. Like that tech debt actually gets taken care of.
Wait,
so
what?
I love it. Yeah, I mean, we still have it. Everyone has tech debt.
Yeah. But I definitely like the fact that you just said something that resonates with me, that you actually get to take care of the tech debt. I'm going to hold my questions for now, but I would definitely like to circle back to that on how that gets handled. But we could do that later.
Yeah, totally. Oh, and then one other thing that will be probably interesting later is they've got 10 locations. There's 3 new ones coming soon, and that affects one of the projects I'm going to cover here. So this is the fun part, where I complain about healthcare in America and how terrible it is. So these problems are not specific to our customer/parent company. These are just like general problems. And these are specific things that we're looking to solve with the software and why Ensamada exists. So I think about this in three parts. Our solution is a medical assistant workflow, a physician workflow, and then we also offer some reporting. And I'm going to go into detail on what these are on the next few slides. Because up until, oh man, maybe about a year ago, I probably didn't even know what an MA was, medical assistant, or MA for short. But you run into them all the time. It's actually the person that you speak to before the doctor comes in for your appointment. So like they call you back, they ask you a million questions, like why you're there, they take your vitals, and sometimes, depending on the doctor, you actually talk to them more than you talk to the actual provider itself. But we are looking to, I don't know why I did it that way. But yeah, this is kind of like questions that they ask. And then at the end, sometimes they will recommend like a treatment plan. They'll be like, oh, you didn't have your flu shot yet this year. Would you like to get it? Type of thing. Then the doctor comes in, looks at you for 5 minutes and like leaves. But anyway, these are the folks who we are targeting to use our medical assistant workflow. Because another interesting thing that I've learned beyond just like the stress of, customer service, having to deal with people that come into the doctor that may be in different levels of mood or stress, they are also doing a lot of data entry. So like the million questions they ask, that gets put into, and usually it's an electronic health record or an EHR for short. And I'm trying to think how I can say this by still seeming professional. EHR systems, I can't speak for all of them, but the ones that I've seen, I feel like they served a good purpose and were probably revolutionary when they first came out. And they are still very useful because that's like the source of truth for your medical data. Very important stuff. But the user interface of them, a lot of them, I don't think they've really innovated. There have been like new updates to how UX should be and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So let me show you some examples. Like imagine, you got a patient coming in, and on top of dealing with all that, you're dealing with how the heck do I use this software? And this isn't meant to like rag on these specific vendors. Like I'm sure their stuff is good and secure in that regard, but just from a UX standpoint, here's what one might look like. It's a lot. It's got a lot going on there. Then here's my favorite one. There's a lot of functionality there because I think electronic health records, and these are my words, it's kind of like if you took a doctor's doodle book and tried to make it electronic. And that's kind of the challenge in it because a lot of fields are going to be optional. Data integrity might not necessarily be what you would expect because of that, because they need that flexibility to write in something because it could be a disease they've never seen before and there's not an option for it.
Hey, but Danielle, it's color coded. I mean, you can't go wrong with color coding.
Yeah. I think my favorite one about this one is the upper right, the buttons.
The little note section, right? Yeah.
I don't even know what those do. But anyway, sorry. I don't mean to rag too much, but yeah. This is what people are dealing with. And I would encourage you the next time you go to the doctor, see if you can like look over their shoulder and see what it looks like.
I do. And the first screenshot is the one that I'm used to seeing. And they ask you the bazillion questions.
They normally won't let you, depending on the doctor you go to though, some of them won't let you like peer over
mine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Mine does. It's like right there. They actually have a screen dedicated to my view while they're asking me and making sure that they're typing in the info correctly.
Okay, some changes. There we go.
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, if it's your data, like you should be able to look at it.
Be able to. I agree. Mm-hmm.
But cool. So this is a quick screenshot of what Ensymata looks like. This is a test patient because I definitely cannot show you patient data. But we've kind of taken the approach of, and this is just my opinion / bias because I work on this, it's not necessarily the prettiest thing that you've seen, but it's very functional in terms of there's not a lot going on the top there. I should have taken more screenshots of like what each tab looks like, but we've kind of thought, don't overwhelm them with information. They can go through the vitals, save it, move on to the next tab. And then like if they get interrupted or something, it's easier to come back and remember where you left off.
Mm-hmm.
And another like special flavor that we add on this that the EHR that our customer uses does not offer is at the very end of this, once everything's filled out, we have a special rules engine that we have. And all these answers get sent to the rules engine. Rules engine just kind of mostly fancy if-else statements. And it will return for each hit on those if-else statements, it'll return recommended treatment for that patient. So yeah, like a flu shot, a mammogram, certain tests, things like that. And we really, this is a really important thing about Ensymada because the EHR does not offer that. But also if you think about like from a human standpoint, it can be easy to forget to ask things like that. So that's why we've automated it. And it's got a really nice screen where the MA can like check, if they want it or if they don't. And then they also have a record of, hey, we offered this to this patient for whatever reason they might want to use that for.
So curious, does it integrate with other doctor tools? Like, I'm not sure, but if they had like a tool that came over and like a caliper and, they were checking body fat or something, and then it automatically has the entry plug into the software. Do you have that capability right now?
That would be cool. No, we don't offer that yet.
All right. It's okay. I haven't seen it, but I was just curious if it's something that, maybe in the future, you take the stethoscope and you put it there and it records the heartbeats, all that other stuff too. That would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, one thing that I kind of have my eye on, I'm not sure, I think it might exist. It doesn't exist in our system, but I love the idea of you come in, you're just having a conversation with the MA. People opt into this obviously for privacy reasons because some AI is listening to you and then it does the data entry for the MA. And then it just feels like you're hanging out, having a conversation. Like I would love to see something like that.
That would be interesting. But again, to your point, just the earshot, and whether or not it's actually doing the entry for the right person, voice biometrics, right?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's why like a lot of stuff like that is not very well, and also privacy too, because you're feeding medical information to like an LLM. But I love the idea if it could be implemented properly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's get to the physician workflow. So I'm a millennial, if you haven't figured that out yet. I really hate talking on the phone. And I also used to work in a call center, so I really hate talking on the phone. But for better or worse, a lot of doctors' offices are still very telephone-based. And that's the basis of our physician workflow. So this is not including telephone calls where you call in to schedule. This is including telephone calls where you have a medical question or you need a follow-up. Let me up my thing here. Yeah, so it's just like a list of telephone conversations. It's a call queue. You can click into it and then there's like notes. We've also added functionality for if a doctor is calling for like abnormal test results and they need to recommend you get a second test. They could place that order right in the in our app. So that's nothing like this exists in the EHR. How it works in the EHR is the specific one that our customer is using is you have to go to like the individual patient and then fill out, they call them telephone encounters, but yeah, telephone conversations. Whereas this is nice because it's just like a work list that you can pick from, and you can assign it to people just to really make sure that, these telephone conversations are followed up on. Because how many times have you called somewhere and they don't call you back? And especially for healthcare, it can be really important, like life or death. So, unfortunately, I was not able to get a screenshot of that. So let's just move on. So let's talk some tech, just kind of how all this is set up. The next slide is going to be a very, very simplified bunch of boxes that are tied together, just to kind of give you a bird's eye overview. And then the following slides will be digging into some of those boxes in more detail. And I'm sure you're probably going to have questions on some of it because it is not standard. Cool. So I think the most interesting part about this is the fact that we are hybrid in terms of, to the left of the line, we have Ensemada, which is fully on AWS. And then to the right of the line, we have an on-premises data center. And this on-premises data center is all maintained by our customer's IT department. And the reason why this started is because a lot of EHR software, how it works is you purchase a software license for it, and then you are responsible for installing it on a server and then maintaining it. So that's why we have the on-premises.
The other thing I was thinking too, because I have to deal with some of this, is also having it on-prem, does it help when it comes to like HIPAA and PII?
Yeah, that's a big thing with a lot of this. We need to be HIPAA compliant because we deal with that. So yeah, for sure. So anyway, let's just start with the right. I'll just kind of do the high level overview and then we'll go into more detail. So on the far right, we have the EHR server maintained by our customer's IT department and the corresponding database. I think it's like Microsoft SQL Server or something. Anyway, they built a REST API in front of the EHR, and I'm going to get into that next. That's a really, really interesting thing. And then, so we crossed the line into Ensemada, and this box just says sync. So this is where things get a little weird. And I guess I can tell you why. This took a while for me to grasp my head on, but I think I'm finally there and understand it. For business reasons, the EHR needs to be our source of truth for data. So for that reason, and also for latency reasons, we periodically sync data from the EHR into our system. And then we also push data back because that MA workflow that I showed you, they're answering the million questions, and that has to go to the EHR if that's our source of truth. So that's where it gets non-standard. I think it's mostly just because they didn't want to blow up their existing system. They wanted to keep it around, but they also wanted to build on it and improve. But I'll get into more on the sync later because that's a pretty interesting part and very complicated. But yeah, so the rest of it is like our rules engine that I had mentioned. We use GraphQL, and then we have a web app and an admin web app. So let's get into this REST API. So essentially, the EHR does not have an API layer that you can like programmatically access because it is older software. But an employee at the parent company reverse engineered how the EHR worked. It was something regarding watching stored procedures. So like he would go into the EHR software, like click something, watch the database to see what stored procedures were called, write it down, and then re-implement those stored procedures in order to create this REST API. So like super genius, but also, this is my opinion, somewhat hacky. But very creative solution. And if it weren't for this, like we would have to completely redo this. And another thing about this is the IT department, they use it for other apps. Before they decided to spin off and for Ensamata, they've got some other like internal apps that they use this for. So
nice.
But yeah. And then the cool thing about this is like they're all available in Slack. So if something's going wrong, they are very responsive. So that's kind of where I say like I kind of view them as extended coworkers, even though technically they're not my immediate coworker.
Right. Nice. I like that story though, because it takes me back to when I was learning networking, and one of my first jobs was I actually had to build a new rack, and I had never done it before. So what I did was literally I had a little notebook and I traced where each wire went to and made my own little hand-drawn diagrams. And then I was able to rebuild it into the new stack. So I like that story because sometimes you have to get creative with problem solving, you know? And sometimes just starting at what seems like the most basic thing turns out to be awesome, you know? So I like that.
And you remember it more. I mean, you'll never forget that. I'm pretty sure if we asked you, could probably redraw the diagram right now too, right?
It's in my head, yes. And so this person, you know, they probably know like this system almost feels like it's like, you know, looking at the back of their hand, you know, type thing. Like they're very comfortable with it.
Oh yeah, this guy's a genius, and he also has a team behind him now. So like, it's not like the bus factor, which is awesome. But yeah, they also give us Swagger docs as well, just so we know which endpoints are available and how to call the different endpoints. I think Swagger's called Open API now. It's a spec for how to define REST APIs.
Yep.
Cool. Let's move on. So this is the fun part. And after this, I'm going to show you a quick diagram. This is where a lot of our serverless goodness is. So this is a series of AWS managed services, and we use this to periodically sync. So to on-prem and from on-prem. And I think I covered this already, but yeah, the two main reasons is because the on-prem EHR is our source of truth. And secondarily, it's also a latency issue. Sometimes when we do direct calls to the data center, like it comes back fine. But other times it's not. So that's kind of why we do this. And I will admit, this is my opinion. I feel like it's an imperfect solution, but I think that's what's awesome about this story is weird problems call for weird solutions.
But it just means also it has room to grow.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't cover this very much, but we use this service. It's an AWS service called Direct Connect. And that's how we can, I believe it's run over VPN. Everything needs to be encrypted, you know, at rest and in transit. I mean, you should probably do that anyway if you're dealing with people's personal information, but especially with healthcare for sure. So nothing ever leaves our VPC or the VPN that goes into. But yeah, so we have, and whenever we sync stuff over, we have our overnight sync, which we call the daily sync. It is a series of different things that we sync over. For the most part, we take a look to see what appointments are within the next 24 hours. We sync that data over. There are also things like patients attached to that appointment. We also sync that over. Mm-hmm. And then, as you can imagine, there are things like walk-ins. There's things like I canceled my appointment or I rescheduled my appointment. And for that reason, we have a frequent sync is what we call it. Runs every 5 minutes and it just looks for updates. So it's definitely not as long.
Nice.
But yeah, let's look at a quick diagram. And these are like multiple syncs. So I'll just do an example of like high level of what the patient sync might look like. So we use EventBridge Scheduler.
Nice.
Newest service for me. when I first started here, which is awesome. So if it's like the overnight sync, I forget what time it runs. But anyway, yeah, it will trigger an event, and that event will also have a timestamp on it of when it was triggered. We use that in this trigger Lambda to determine our window of where we want to look for data that we need to grab. So like in this case, we're syncing patients, maybe patients over the next 3 hours or something. We do call to the corporate data center. It's actually just that REST API we just talked about, to see which patients have appointments within that time frame. And then for each patient that we have an appointment for within that time frame that needs to be synced, we do an EventBridge put event. I missed that in this diagram. But then that triggers an EventBridge rule and triggers an AWS step function for us. And the reason why we chose step functions is because this is we got to grab a lot of different facets of this patient. So like things like allergies, medication, medical history, and like those are all different API endpoints that we have to hit. So it's much easier to just have like a parallel series of step functions that call at the same time. But yeah, definitely more than one way to do this. And but yeah, so anyway, yeah, the step function calls out to the on-premises REST API to get the data that needs to sync, maybe for allergies or something. Then it writes it to our Ensymada API, which will then, makes a call to our Ensymada API. This is a Fargate cluster. And then that puts it into our RDS, which is Postgres. Okay. And then we're ready for the appointment.
Nice. So how did you find trying out EventBridge Scheduler? I checked it out pretty much shortly after they released it. And I do use it a lot to do some automating things.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, I use like the ancestor to it. Is it like EventBridge rule?
Yeah.
CloudWatch rule. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is way nicer because it has a lot more integrations, but it's also confusing because then it's like, how do I set up this integration?
Yes. Yes. I had to proof of concept that to get it to finally do what I needed it to do. And then once I got that working, yeah, I'm able to like trigger certain lambdas late at night.
Very cool. Yeah.
Here's the thing with the lambdas. So do you like to use Python or something different?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I hadn't included that. We use TypeScript at
nice. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like my preference, especially when it comes to Lambda, is generally TypeScript or Python, just because that's what all the examples are written in.
For me, that's the new one. I have not considered using TypeScript, so now you have my wheels turning. I'm going to have to go play around with that now.
Yeah, and we use AWS CDK to deploy it, and CDK like packages it and does the build and everything for you. So I think it's great. Nice. All right, let me move on here. So yeah, I'll just zoom in a little on the Ensymada API. Pretty standard, in my opinion, Node Postgres setup. We use something called Nest.js, N-E-S-T, for our server. And this is just where the syncs send data to. It does the outgoing syncs as well. And I kind of view this mostly as just like our cache of data from the EHR. It's not a cache, but we're kind of using it like a cache. Let's go into, all right, so GraphQL. This is pretty typical GraphQL setup. We use AppSync, which is the AWS managed GraphQL service. And there's different ways you can write resolvers. And we chose the Lambda resolvers method because we have multiple data sources. So we use the Ensymada API, depending on which query mutation is called. It might go to the Ensymada API. It might go to the rules engine. And then this is another interesting but it might also write directly to the on-premises REST API. And the one exception, this is the one exception because of orders. Orders are like if they call for a flu shot, if they call for a like any type of test. The business requirements are that they get that data as soon as possible, because I believe it's the EHR itself that places the order currently. So, Rules Engine. So Rules Engine itself, from an infrastructure standpoint, is not that interesting, kind of similar to our Ensymada API, but I really think the content of it is what's interesting. So it's our, currently right now, for better or for worse, hard-coded rules, because they are pretty custom and they don't change too often. And for the most part, we're just adding rules. But with that said, there's been a lot of talk about, we have that admin web app, wanting to allow people who aren't engineers to add rules. So this is one area we're looking to improve on. But yeah, this is one of kind of the killer features of Ensymada is, the automatic recommendations for preventative care. So web app, nothing too fancy, just a good SPA. This is where our MA and physician workflow lives. Just wanted to mention that. Similar to the admin app. And then another thing, I'm kind of surprised I didn't get asked this question, but maybe people have this question in their head. Sometimes with these syncs that happen, it is not an exact science all the time. So in some cases, sometimes like you might pull up a patient and be like, oh, this is totally wrong. I'm supposed to have an appointment for this person today. Why is this not here? Within this admin web app, we have a way where people can manually trigger a sync to pull that data over. Assuming, our on-premises stuff is not restarting or things like that, but that's tech for you.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you're saying that there's a point in time where there could be a possibility where it's not in sync, given the frequency that it's actually updating the information?
Sometimes, yeah. It's a very, very deep edge case, but we did want to build this in because it's really important that we have all this data.
Okay.
Yeah, because one question I was saving that I was thinking of is speaking, about the source of truth is how do you make sure the source of truth and everything, in the different syncs is there something that does any kind of checking? Is there like a manual, like roughly grab a data set, to make sure things are properly syncing?
Oh, yeah. That's a fantastic question. We rely very heavily on CloudWatch alarms for that. So like if the tunnel's down or things like that, we will immediately know. And then we have a direct line to the IT department because if it's down and doesn't work, why use the app, Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, CloudWatch alarms. We also use New Relic a little bit as well for monitoring. But
nice. How are you finding CloudWatch alarms? Like for me, I'm forever every day trying to get better at CloudWatch because CloudWatch is how it is. So one of my big things I'm always focused on is how I remove the noise from, say, the different alerts and events that we get in there. So that way we're actually able to quickly see things that we actually need to jump on like right away, stuff like that.
Yeah, we pipe it into our Slack channel. So we have one for like dev alerts and then one for prod alerts. And people are just always watching, especially the prod one. But sometimes when the dev one goes down, that can be a good sign that things aren't going well. So that's why we have that. But we kind of go with the philosophy of start with it being really chatty and then you kind of dial it in how you want it.
Okay. Yeah, you're speaking my language.
But different approaches for sure. Because alert fatigue is a real thing. So
that is called my Outlook inbox.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of which, how do you alleviate that fatigue of alerts? Are you using some type of artificial intelligence to kind of collate all the information that you're getting, or are you only relying on the fact that, hey, I get an alert, I need to go and check it regardless? Or is it like a group thing?
Yeah. Right now it's a little more manual because we are like a smaller team. But yeah, a lot of times it's just kind of like, I get this alarm all the time and like, it's not really a problem. So usually the person will just like proactively put up a PR, and then through that process is when we either argue about it or decide to go with it.
So no predictive analysis and analytics just yet, right?
Yeah.
Right? Identifying patterns.
It does seem like a really good use of like that type of tech. So
yeah.
Cool. So this is the last part of the system that I'm going to talk about. And earlier when I mentioned that they had 3 new locations opening soon, this was driven by that. So I view this as an extension to the MA workflow, and you'll see why in a sec. But the problem that we're looking to solve is if someone is a brand new patient, a lot of times, like in these new locations, they're going to show up and we will have 0 information on them. So we want to do our best to help, make their first experience in this healthcare system positive, because going to the doctor is tiring and terrible for some people. And if we can lift that cognitive load of already having as much information as we can get, we're going to do it. So particle health, I guess maybe I should back up. So healthcare data is highly regulated. The federal government does have rules that these EHRs need to output their data. And I don't 100%, I won't go into too many details because I don't know all the details, but there's like these different medical networks that they need to output their data into. And for a good reason, not just anyone can have access to these networks, because it's very information that like you wouldn't want the whole world to see.
No.
And Particle Health is a company that has like all the proper certifications and things needed in order to have access to these networks. And they offer a really cool API that we can use to access these data networks.
Okay.
So that's your first integration point, essentially, for additional data for EHR.
Yes, correct. And mostly focused on new patients now, but we're looking to potentially add like other triggers, like if they're on Medicare or high risk, whatever that means, like things like that. But yeah, and mostly we just want to have this in order to have more information to put through that rules engine so we can better recommend preventative care so people can get treatment before things become a real problem. So let's look at another diagram. This one was fun. Kind of similar to the sync, actually. It is an EventBridge Scheduler. This triggers every hour, and it's got a 24-hour look ahead. And it triggers a Lambda function. The Lambda function is actually calling our Entomata API to get info for patients with appointments. It says that day, but it's within that 24-hour look ahead window. And if they're new, and then one other thing that I didn't add in was if we haven't queried them within the last 30 days, because Particle Health, when you query them, they will cache that data for 30 days. So it's like, we don't need to make another call because they also have kind of a serverless-ish type of billing model in that every time we query them, like they charge us. So that's why we're guarding against that a little bit, or being smarter about it. But anyway, so if someone needs to be run, if we determine like we want to get their info because they met, all of our rules, it triggers a step function. And this step function is where we call Particle Health. Particle Health has an interesting API, and I think it's because of how these data networks work. So like essentially you grab as much info that you have about the patient, you submit it, and then you wait. And then usually within 20 minutes, Particle Health pings you saying, hey, your data for patient XYZ is ready. And then we can go and do that GET request. And that's one of the reasons why we have a step function here, because if you use a standard Express function, you can do like the callback pattern. So the step function will just keep running while it's waiting for Particle to be like, hey, come get your stuff. So, but anyway, then you get a very massive JSON blob of someone's medical information. If you're lucky, there are some cases where we do get empty responses, but in most cases, it's like the biggest JSON blob I've seen in my life. And for that reason, we put it in S3. So you can put massive things in there. And then from a business standpoint, we don't necessarily need all of that data that we're getting. It's just what Particle gives us. So that's the reason why the put will trigger another step function. And this step function is essentially just crawling this massive JSON blob to pull the data that we're interested in. And then it is posting it to our on-prem EHR. And then the last step is then when our sync fires up in 5 minutes, then it gets synced back to us. But yeah, pretty interesting solution, mostly because of how healthcare works. So anytime you see like a system that seems like a little like this is more work than it should be, a lot of times it's usually because there's like some sort of regulation. And I think in the terms of healthcare, like as a human that goes to the doctor, I'm glad these regulations exist.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I have a curious question. While looking at some of your designs, I was just kind of curious, and I know you said before you're not looking at doing any kind of artificial intelligence right now, large language models because of regulation. But is there at any point any kind of consideration that you're going to use like Amazon Comprehend Medical to integrate with your particular application, or is that kind of out of the scope of what you would want to use it for?
Yeah, that would be interesting. I've actually never used it. I think folks probably would be open to it. It really just depends on what the businessmen say that they need.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, great question. Okay. Yeah, would love to play around with that. Yeah,
that would be kind of interesting to see how the app would function with that. But again, it all has to do, of course, with the EHR data and the PHI. PII, so you'd probably end up having to do a lot of initial testing to be able to verify that it's not that it's being used in a way you want it to be used with your particular data.
Yeah, especially with medical or finance. It's like as a citizen of the earth, I want to make sure that works.
Especially the finance one.
Why the finance?
I mean, if it's like the opposite, like I can pull out more money, I'm good with that. But
as long as it's not being tracked.
All right.
We're only playing people, and we would give it back, we promise.
But yeah, about done here. So yeah, just kind of future ongoing thoughts. Like as always, we're looking to add more features. And another interesting thing, I mentioned that we currently only have one customer. The reason for that is because up until more recently, Ensamada has been a little more of a pilot program. Because they wanted to test us out and see if this experiment would work. And we're getting to the point where we've been able to prove that it's successful, and we are getting ready to take on more customers currently. So working on making this multi-tenant, which honestly, I've never done that before. I've always started with a multi-tenant system. So it's kind of interesting for me.
That should be a fun journey. I'm also hearing a follow-up, maybe guest appearance where, say, once you get to the multi-tenant, maybe we can talk about that. I would be curious about that because I've always started where it's already multi-tenant as well. So I think that would be very interesting. I think you're about to have a lot of fun. That's what that sounds like.
I think because you're adding more features, you're going to have a lot more fun too as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably a lot more
yeah.
in development work, research, plus not to mention again with a lot of the new developments that are coming up with some of the later technology that we have coming up now, Gen AI. There's probably some additional things that can and cannot be done, but it would be interesting to see where it goes from here. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, healthcare is its own animal. And I'm also learning too, like there's a billion different healthcare data shape standards as well out there. So it's almost like learning a new programming language with having to figure out some of these data standards, but it's very fun.
Now, do you find that healthcare is still a slow adopter when it comes to technology? I mean, because you said before that the apps that you're using now are pretty legacy apps. They haven't really changed, haven't really done any kind of innovation or anything like that. Do you see, like, for instance, it's going to take longer for them to adapt to, hey, you know what, we're seeing a lot of the changes from your organization, and we want to integrate this now into more and more solutions going forward? And of course, that brings us to the onboarding more customers question as well, right?
Yeah, I do think, and this is just my opinion, someone else might tell you a different opinion, but I definitely think healthcare is a slow adopter. But to a degree, sometimes I think there's good reasons for that, because you don't want someone updating a database every year so they can have the new hotness, but then you lose your medical information. So not meaning to be apologetic for it, but I do also, on the other hand, feel like they probably could stand to move slightly faster than they do. And I really do think, obviously I'm biased, but I think that the parent company they've got a lot of foresight into even thinking like, hey, we should create this Ensimata thing because this EHR that we use is terrible. I think in a regular world, that's not revolutionary, but in a healthcare world, it is.
So I have another question really quick.
Yes.
So, and this is probably more off the wall, outside of, Ensimata per se, but just curious, what are your thoughts on, for instance, a lot of the, data breaches that have been happening within healthcare? And do you think that as your organization decided, hey, these are the ways that we are going to start mitigating, put in any kind of controls so that we can mitigate those type of breaches in the future?
Yeah, especially with that most recent one. I think it was something with billing.
Billing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was pretty catastrophic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is highly important. Our company, we are very serious about HIPAA. But with that said, HIPAA is more of like a privacy type of rule. So like, someone gets a fax at the doctor's office, you make sure that not everyone can see that fax. But we definitely do go above and beyond, just by, watching what we log, being really careful with who has access to production, prod data. Trying to think what else. Yeah, and also too, like, especially because we are doing like the hybrid thing, like it does go over the wire to go into the data center. We are very focused on making sure that, that VPN is secure, because that's another potential area where things can get penetrated. So yeah, we definitely do take it very seriously. And I think, well, I guess just speaking from an Ensimata standpoint, they do a really good job of hiring empathetic humans. So I kind of spoiled that I get to work on a team where you don't have to tell people to be good humans. They just are. And part of that is, really taking people's data seriously. And especially in this case, because it's even higher, because it's people's healthcare data. And I would hope that other entities are good like that. But as a citizen of the world, I am a little terrified. Tinfoil hat time. Yeah, it's hard to tell, like, because you really do need to be careful who you trust with your data, but also at the same time, sometimes you don't always get to opt in because if it's like a vendor of someone that you use. So, but that's true anywhere, not just in healthcare.
True.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tinfoil hats. Cool. I guess I'll do my next to last slide. So this was just kind of the story of how we used an existing on-premises solution and just kind of built on top of it with modern tech to extend it out. And I think this experience has taught me, we all want to, make a real dent in the world and just kind of blow all the existing systems up that are terrible and replace them with better things. But in the real world, like that's not necessarily something you can always do. So I think at the very best, what we can do is just do whatever you can to make things better than how you found them and just keep building on that. And I think that's kind of what this is the story of. It's not a perfect solution, but it's definitely better than how we found it. And for the techies in the audience, if you're looking for really interesting challenges that really positively impact people, I'd say consider checking out healthcare tech. I've only been there for maybe 10 months, but it's been really great. Yeah, this is my my website and all that, but you already shared it, so I'm good.
Actually, I don't think we shared the actual website there.
Yeah, not the website.
Oh yeah, you just shared my handle. Yeah, that's my website.
Handle for Twitter. Right.
If you want to read some of my blog post ramblings and watch my other talks that I have up there, so mostly about serverless.
Okay, I'm posting a link.
I got a block message. You are not allowed to access the site. Okay.
So there's the website.
Is that my website?
All right. No, it's not. It's not you.
Oh, wow. I was like,
it's me. It's my side. It's on my side. You're right.
Oh, you got to turn that VPN off or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I was like, oh God, did I break something? Okay.
No, I was able to access it, and we also have someone in the audience who's also able to access your website. So you're good.
XYZ domains are much cheaper than .com. So if you're looking for a good deal, check out XYZ.
Yes. This is true. This is true. Nice. Okay, so I think we are at time. This was interesting. Let's see if there's any last minute questions. Otherwise, definitely this will get posted to YouTube, and we will put in the description how to reach you. Danielle, thanks for coming on. Thanks everybody who came and hung out with us. I don't know why they put me in control tonight, but they did. We got through it. So this was fun. It was super entertaining, and you were definitely speaking my language. Like a lot of what you're showing is my current life right now. So this tool that I'm building. So I'm just like, this is making a whole lot of sense too. All right, so with that, I'm gonna go ahead and end this show. So good night, everybody. We'll see you next time.